So last Friday's commitment of traders report out of the CFTC, speculative longs when it comes to the euro continue to wait for an upside movement. They shifted to majority long back in March. Since then, they got punished with a move that briefly flirted with the 106s. But last week, it was positive in the sense that euro did outperform against the US dollar. EURUSD's price did finish higher, and they're continuing to hold a majority long bias in the euro at 64%. What about the pound? Well, the pound did outperform against the US dollar. They've upped their bias to a majority short 61%. So far that hasn't really quite been in their favor. They're still waiting for some sort of move back down. And when it comes to safe haven currencies, they continue to hold a heavy long bias in both yen and franc. Now, USDJPY's price could make lower moves, but until then, it's been a relatively range-bound movement. It briefly flirted with lower lows last week before coming back up. And at the end of the day, although the US dollar was an underperformer against most of the FX pairs, it did manage to best the yen. So that's a case where, again, where their patience is definitely getting tested. But when it comes to commodity currencies, that's really where they got punished, and that's because they're holding a heavy short bias, or I should say continue to hold a heavy short bias when it comes to the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, as well as the New Zealand dollar. The bias there is about 70% short, and while commodity currencies, they outperformed last week, so clearly that was a case where it wasn't in their favor. Now, when it comes to oil, we're approaching the OPEC Plus meeting. They continue to hold an extreme long bias. Not much of a story there just yet, but let's face it, 5 consecutive weeks of gains for the energy commodity, definitely a pleasant sight for those holding an extreme long bias, and where a lot of those longs were initiated well above current market price. And when it comes to precious metals, when it comes to gold, we're seeing that although they're still holding extreme long territory, they have backed off a bit from those extreme long levels that we saw around 90% a few weeks back. And when it comes to silver, they're actually upping their bias. They're upping it to 72% long. Silver did outperform last week, so that was definitely in their favor. In fact, we're seeing the gold-silver ratio drop for, was it 4 consecutive weeks? A pretty harsh drop from the record highs that we saw back in March. Lastly, in indices, well, in this case, they continue to hold majority short bias in both consolidated Dow and S&P 500. But interestingly enough, in the Nasdaq, they've actually shifted from majority short back to majority long.